Guys, welcome back. It is Racer X, and today I actually want to put together a comparison video. I'd like to compare the Charger or the Challenger 5.7 RT versus some of its closest competitors. It may be a car that's similar either in power or a car that might be similar in price point. I think there are a lot of people out there that simply want to know, hey, is my RT faster or slower than some of the things that you might compare it to? So it should be a fun little video. Also, if you are new to the channel, you are not currently subscribed, make sure you hit the subscribe button down here in the corner, hit that notification bell, and we are off. We got the 1,000 horsepower helmet. So a little while back, I actually did a very similar comparison with the Charger or Challenger Scat Pack, and it was really interesting to see just how many people out there not only own a Scat Pack, but wanted to see how it stacked up against some of the competition that was out there. Actually, a really fun little video. It seemed to be well received, so I figured, you know what? Why not try the Scat Pack's little brother in the RT, and maybe we can find out just what it can beat, what it can't beat, and maybe give you guys a little bit of information. Why not? Okay, so I am back with my buddies at Clay Cooley Dodge in Irving, Texas, and I'm actually going to take a little harder look at this this Charger behind me. This is actually one of their 5.7 Hemi Chargers. This is the RT package, and this is kind of the vehicle that I wanted to compare to the others today. I could also look at the Challenger, but I tend to gravitate a lot towards the Challenger when I look at the RTs, and I kind of want to just show you the Charger today. This is a fantastic package, and there it is. It's the 5.7 liter naturally aspirated Hemi, putting out 400 pound-feet of torque, 372 horsepower, has a nice grumbly V8 sound to it. I actually pulled the fuel rail covers off of this to just give you a better look at the intake on this car, kind of get the best look at it. You can see that the intake is actually very similar like what you'd see on some of the Scat Packs out there, but this particular thing is kind of a unique car. I want to tell you why. So now inside the Dodge Charger RT, I will say that just one of the things I've always loved about Chargers is just that they are so roomy. If you are a larger individual, if you're over 6 feet tall, or you're more heavy set, or just whatever, have wider shoulders, this is still a very, very comfortable car to just ride in, to drive, to own. That is one of the fantastic things about Mopars, but the Charger especially, man, obviously they offer all the different trims from the SXT all the way up to the wide body Hellcat right now, and hopefully soon to be the Red Eye. But I will say that, man, just across the board, these are just very, very comfortable cars to drive in. So one of the things that I feel like I really need to point out about the RT package is that it kind of sits in a little bit of a weird spot in terms of just the power pyramid of all the sports cars that are out there right now. It didn't used to. This would be kind of the sort of the upper echelon in terms of naturally aspirated horsepower, but that simply isn't the case anymore. Obviously, we know we've got the Scat Pack Challenger out there that puts out 485 horsepower, and then we've got even the rivals up to the Scat Pack, which would be like the Mustang GTs of the world and the Camaro SSs of the world, and those things all sit mid-4s or higher in horsepower, and they're lighter. So this one with 372 and 400 pound-feet of torque really does sit in a little bit of a weird spot, but the great thing about it is that it still has that just beautiful V8 grumble when I hit it, as you can hear. There it goes. Sounds really, really good, and I really enjoy that. And for anybody out there who's a V8 fan, you still have to love the RT, and even when you start it up, it sounds really, really good, and it will still sit you back in the seat to some degree, and it's just a really neat package on the RT. But in order to be fair, I feel like I need to compare this car to vehicles that are like in price and vehicles that are like in horsepower range as best I can. And one other quick qualifier on this comparison, and I just need to say it because I know I get a lot of comments about this every time. You know, if you just throw a cam and headers and all this other stuff at this car, it's just as good and all. Guys, we're talking about stock for stock. It's the only way to do this comparison and be fair about it. It is stock for stock. How does the RT Charger or the RT Challenger stack up against the competition? So I just want to make sure we're clear on that. So a couple other things I do want to mention. This particular car weighs almost 4,300 pounds. So it is likely going to be heavier than a lot of the other cars that I compare it to. And that's just part of Mopar, unfortunately. Mopars tend to be on the heavier side. There's nothing wrong with that because the Hemi is a very punchy motor, which I absolutely love. I really adore the RT trim, guys. I didn't really pay that much attention to it, at first, but now as I'm starting to get more into the other trim levels, I actually really like the RT. I think it's just a really fun package that does a lot of things well. So here's the big question though. How fast is it? So I did a little research on it, just wanted to find out. Remember guys, this is a stock number, but it does say that this thing runs about 5.2 seconds, 0 to 60. And the quarter mile time on this is listed at 13.8 seconds. Mind you, that's probably with a street tire on it, but we'll say for the sake of argument, and I'll try and do all of the comparisons in the same fashion, but 13.8 seconds seems to be the number to beat there at the quarter mile. And you know what? Compared to most family sedans, this should win, but compared to the other stuff we're going to compare it to, we'll see. Let's see how it goes. So one of the cars that I think makes a pretty interesting comparison to the Charger and the Challenger RT is actually from Camaro. It is actually the LT Camaro. This particular car actually comes with a 4-cylinder. It's an inline 4, but it has a turbo on it. We're talking 295 horsepower. However, so yes, it is shy on horsepower. However, this car is 1,000 pounds lighter than you find in the Charger. That makes a huge difference. So when we're talking about performance, you have to take weight into account. So what does this thing actually run in the quarter? So here's what I know. The Camaro RS, which is their, like I said, their 4-cylinder actually runs 5.5, 0 to 60. So it's actually a little bit faster than the Charger or Challenger RT. However, the big V8 does reel it in on the big end. This thing is actually listed at 14.1 seconds at 103 miles an hour. So you kind of have to give the edge to the Charger and the Challenger RT in this one. Obviously, we know if we step up to the SS in this, you get their V8 car, which is significantly more powerful and lighter, and it is not a very good comparison, as I mentioned before. That's more of a comparison for the Scat Pack. So we're on to the next one. One car that I think makes a really interesting comparison is actually a car that I really like and almost bought instead of my STI. It is actually the Kia Stinger, which has a fantastic interior, very, very sharp car. But you have to pay close attention to the trims. They've got a bunch of different trim levels on these two cars. For example, the two behind me are two different trims. One is the GT, which features their V6 engine, which is actually a twin turbocharged 3.3 liter V6, putting out, 365 horsepower and 376 pound-feet of torque. I want to make sure I got that right. And they are quick all-wheel drive. The other trim here is actually the GT line, and that is a different engine altogether. That is actually a single turbo 4-cylinder. It's an inline 4, and it puts out 255 horsepower and puts out 260 pound-feet of torque. Like I said, that's the line, the GT line. This is the GT, and they actually have a GT1 and a GT2, which have different interior trim levels and things like that. But these are quick little cars, and there's a pretty big following with the Kia Stinger. So as you can imagine, the numbers are quite different in the quarter and the 0 to 60. Do keep in mind that you can get the Kia Stinger in a non-all-wheel or just a rear-wheel drive configuration as well. But in terms of the all-wheel drive, when you talk about the V6 version of this, they are really quick. They're actually way quicker than you would think. Believe it or not, they actually say this will run a 12.9 at 111 miles an hour, and 0 to 60 times are like 4.5. So if you're in an RT and you're messing with a Kia Stinger and it is the GT, the GT1 or the GT2, it is going to be a force to be reckoned with. It is probably going to be significantly faster than your RT. Now, when we're talking about the GT line, that is a different story. You're talking about a car that runs 0 to 60 somewhere in the 5.8 range at in the quarter mile somewhere around 14.2 at about 101 miles an hour. So definitely something to consider on that. So if you run into a GT line, chances are if you're in an RT, you're going to be able to take them. If it happens to be just the GT or the GT1 or the GT2, chances are you're going to get drugged pretty good because those cars are quick. So fun little comparison there. On to the next one. naturally, I think the next best car to compare it to is actually my daily. Some of you may have seen the race against the RT versus the Subaru WRX STI recently that I put out, and it was actually a really fun race. So at the end of the day, it's actually very much a driver's race between the WRX STI and the Charger or the Challenger RT. Now, I will say there's some huge differences between these cars. Obviously, this is a manual car, so a lot of it is going to depend on driver skill. And in a roll race, actually, I think the Charger may have been ever so slightly faster, but it was very, very close. I feel like from a dig, it's kind of hard to tell. I mean, the STI is actually listed at 5.1 on all the sources that I could find. But once again, you're talking about just driver skill. Are they dumping the clutch? There's a lot of different things that go into racing a manual car, but it does list a quarter-mile time at almost the exact same as what you see the Charger RT, which is like 13.9 at 103 miles an hour. So when it comes to the WRX stock for stock, it is most definitely a driver's race. Okay, guys, next on my list, you knew it was going to happen. It is from Ford. It is their EcoBoost. So this particular Mustang has a 4-cylinder in it, but it's not just a normal 4-cylinder Mustang. Oh no, it has a turbocharger on it, and it is pretty darn potent. This motor is actually the one out of their Focus RS car, which made 350 horsepower. This one's been detuned a little bit, but it still makes 332 horsepower and 350 pound-feet of torque. It is an aggressive car, and this one weighs about 3,600 pounds. So when you think about it, it's still about 600 to 700 pounds lighter than the Challenger or the Charger. So big weight difference there. They actually claim this thing will run the quarter in 13.6 at like 106 miles an hour. And the really impressive stat on this is it will actually run in the mid 4s, 0 to 60. It is quite a quick little car. So when you compare it, how will it do against the Charger or the Challenger RT? Believe it or not, this little 4-cylinder is probably going to win against the RT. It has quite a little, it's quite a punchy car. So something to think about there, guys. If you're going to face an EcoBoost Mustang, they actually top end a little faster than the RT. So you've got to be aware of that. All right, next one on my list, guys, is this one behind me. That is a Nissan. It is a 370Z. This particular one is actually a Nismo edition. I actually just want to kind of reference the normal Nissan 370Z. And it is actually a pretty fun comparison between that car and the Charger or Challenger RT. So on this one, it actually makes the exact same amount of horsepower as the EcoBoost Mustang, 332. It's down a little bit in torque. I believe it's 276 on the torque. Naturally aspirated, 3.7 liter V6 in this car, but it doesn't weigh very much, guys. It's only a little over 3,200 pounds. That means it's over 1,000 pounds lighter than the Challenger RT and 1,100 pounds lighter than the Charger. Huge weight difference. It's just a much smaller car there, guys. So this one actually runs about 5 seconds flat, 0 to 60. And in the quarter mile, it actually, it's rated right about 13.6 at 106 miles an hour. So in a race between the Charger or Challenger RT and the Nissan 370Z, this one is actually a little bit faster by about 3 miles an hour and about 0.3 of a second, 2 to 0.3 of a second. That doesn't mean it wouldn't necessarily be a driver's race, guys, but stock for stock, this one is actually slightly faster. So it makes for a fun little comparison, even though the cars are quite different. But you know what? The Nissan kind of gets the nod on this one. Off to the next one. Okay, guys, next thing on my list. This one right behind me, believe it or not, that is actually a Volkswagen Golf GTI. And I'll have to admit, it looks pretty unassuming. It's a little hatchback car, but here's the thing about this car, guys. There's a huge following with these. It only weighs 3,100 pounds, so 228 horsepower doesn't sound like much at all. 150 horsepower shy of the RT. However, when you're talking about a huge weight difference, like 1,200 pounds, I mean, it's huge. It really is, guys. And that little turbo in that thing is pretty snappy. So I will say also it makes 258 pound-feet of torque. And so 0 to 60 times are right about the same as what they are in the Charger or Challenger RT, right about 5.8 seconds. This one runs about 101 miles an hour in the quarter at like 14.4. So yeah, it is a little bit slower than the RT, but it will get your attention if you're racing one on the highway, guys. But in this matchup, the RT actually gets the nod. Okay, next one up on my hit list, guys, is This beautiful machine behind me, that is a BMW 330i. This is BMW's kind of flagship sports sedan. This thing is a very, very popular car. You can buy one for under $50,000. This actually features a 2-liter inline 4-cylinder turbo. This thing puts out 295 horse. It's like 255 pound-feet of torque. But then again, we're also less weight here, about 3,600 pounds, actually just a shade under 3,600 pounds on the 330i. And beautiful car, beautiful interior. And this one actually says it will go 0 to 60 at 5.6 seconds. So right about the same time as a Scat Pack, maybe slightly faster, depending on who you ask. Now in the quarter mile, I do think this is also a driver's race. My research has basically told me that this thing will go 13.8 to 14, right in that range. That is exactly what it says the RT will do. It makes for a fantastic little run. So when you talk about the BMW 330i, versus the Charger or the Challenger RT, it is a driver's race. So it would be a fun little matchup if you saw this one on the track or just on the street. It would be a fun race from a roll as well. Now they do make a 340i in this. That is a 6-cylinder turbo, and that car is actually quite a bit quicker than this one. So the RT would not match up real well against that particular one. So the 330i though, guys, great matchup. And the last car that I want to compare the Charger and Challenger RT to is actually this right here behind me. It is the F-Sport cars, the IS300 and IS350 sports sedans. Lexus makes a fantastic car, as we know. These cars are a little more expensive than what you might get in a comparably trimmed out RT. And this particular one behind me is actually the IS300 F-Sport. This one actually is not really a good comparison with the RT. This one makes 241 horsepower. This sedan weighs somewhere around 3,700 pounds, and it runs somewhere in the mid 14s in the quarter mile. But the IS350 F-Sport is a naturally aspirated V6 car that actually makes like 311 horsepower, and that one is a fantastic comparison to the RT. That car actually goes mid 5s, 0 to 60. And they say 14.1 in the quarter. So I think the RT has a very, very slight edge against the IS350F Sport. Both cars are really, really nice, but I do give the RT the slight nod against the 350. Like I said, against the 300, the RT should walk right away, but it is fun to compare those cars. So guys, that about wraps up my comparison of the RT versus the world, essentially. At the end of the day, I could sit and compare cars to the RT just forever, because there are just so many makes and models out there, each one with its own unique driving experience, and every car sort of has its own merits. But the RT is a very fun package. It is a grumbly V8. Like I said, whether you get the Charger or the Challenger, it's just an enjoyable place to sit and drive. They make great daily cars, and it's not the fastest thing in the world, guys, that we know that. My Hellcat is not the fastest thing in the world. It is what it is, but it's a nice package. So I do want to go ahead and put up a quick list of some cars that I feel like the RT does well against, because I just can't compare that many. I also want to put up a list of cars that you probably should not mess with if you're in an RT, because the list is just so big. So I will list those out now. So at the end of the day, hopefully I was able to give you a little bit of knowledge about the RT and what's faster and what it's faster than. And you know what, the list really just kind of goes on and on. I stayed away from modding cars because I know I'm always going to get those comments, well, if you just took this and took this mod and did this and did it. Of course, guys, the conversation will just continue on forever. I also stuck with new cars because, you know, we can go back in the past as far as we want. Model A, how does it stack up? Guys, we have to kind of cut the comparison off somewhere, but it is fun to compare the different trim levels, the different cars, and just to see how the RT does, because at the end of the day, yes, the RT is still a really fun package, a very fun car to drive, and it does a lot of things well. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the comparison. I really appreciate you sticking in there with me, and I will catch you on the next one. So until then, Racer X.